All right.
We figured it out. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for
You,
joining.
you are very welcome.
I
You're very
appreciate
welcome. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Um, you want to just give a little introduction for about 2 minutes of what you practice and what you do for a living?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Sure. I am an addiction and trauma specialist in Nyack, New York. I've been in practice, private practice since 1987. I've been in the field since 1980 and have worked publicly for several municipalities as a counselor, as a clinical supervisor, as an assistant director, a director, bottle washer, floor mopper, etc. And am very, very committed to helping first responders in any way that I can, in any way that we can. I really believe that life is a we program, and we're seeing that right now in terms of what's going on in the world. But even if we weren't dealing with such a critical time, um, nobody lives on their own. No one is not interdependent. We talk a lot about being independent, but I think that independence is becoming more clearly a fallacy in the kind of world that we live in. We are interdependent, and I think that's what gives us freedom, among other things. Not, striking out on your own course and forgetting about the rest of the world, because the rest of the world, including the bio world, like viruses, are everywhere, and they're not going to buy into our independence. We're being very strongly encouraged right now to stay home. If we need to go out, let it be for essentials. In terms of professions, only essential workers really should be going out at this point. And having the opportunity to talk like we're talking right now, even though, as I said to you earlier, privately, I'm glad I'm not doing a talk on how to use technology. The only thing that would do would be get you to everyone to the level that I'm already. So basically, that's me, and I'm glad that I have this opportunity, Frank, to talk to you and talk with you. I am very honored and proud uh, to have this opportunity through the work that you are doing, which is vital and personally, I want to say magnificent. That you are stepping up and putting yourself out there for not only first responders, but for all of us in the time that we're in right now.
Well, I appreciate that, Joe, and thank you for the kind words, and thank you for being you, for you putting yourself out there for many and many many years. Not too many, but
Yeah, yes, a couple more than you, but it's not a contest.
no, slow and steady, right? Rabbit in the hair. It's a even though it's so cliche, it's a day at a time, just for today, brick by brick, minute by minute, and that's what's going to get us through what we're going through now, especially. So obviously, most people know about what is going on in the world, unless you're living in Iraq or something. But for people that are isolated that really don't have access to different things, and talk about
Mm,
cabin fever, because
sure.
depression, isolation, anxiety, thoughts are going to creep in, especially in this time if you're not busy. What's maybe a little advice or some pointers you can give out to people that aren't able to go to work, or they're just really stuck at home for a long period of time right now?
My goodness, I could give a lot of advice, but starting with uh, a very important way of thinking, which we popularly now call mindfulness. If we can be mindful, and what that means is be focused on what is, right in front of you, how our senses are perceiving what's going on right in front of us. if we can be mindful of the moment and tune into the chatter that's going on in our heads about probably all kinds of what we call projections. If you think of a movie, an old-fashioned movie projector, projecting onto the screen something that's already been taped, our mind is even more more simple and complicated than that. If we can tap into, by slowing ourselves down, to be able to listen to the thoughts that we are telling ourselves, the thoughts that are just kind of seem to be floating up there in our head somewhere, up in inner space, and are getting more and more and more negative and fearful, and catastrophizing everything. And I'm not saying we're not in a serious situation, but for those of us that are heeding the advice and staying inside with the people that we love, which sometimes doesn't mean we always like, but we're kind of stuck together by our relationships, starting with our relationship with ourselves. And what I was saying earlier, if you can get a grip on what you're thinking and how you're thinking about the moment, and keep it in the moment, which basically is, I always say to my patients, where your feet are. Look down. You can feel your feet, without looking down, but if you need to, look down. Guaranteed 100% of the people, maybe who are even listening to me now, are going to discover that their feet are on some solid surface. It could be the floor, it could be the ground, it could be the bed, but your feet are attached to the rest of you. And going through this experience is a full body experience and a full body job. Going back to our thoughts, if we are contemplating that the world is ending in 5 minutes, and we're totally lost and everything that goes with that, and take some breaths. We've been given a respiratory system and and a heart, a circulatory system, and a brain for a lot of very specialized purposes. Not only that they can work on their own so beautifully, but we can actually access all this inner technology of our body to help us with what we're thinking. Once again, back to awareness. If we're aware that we've got a pit in our stomach, or that our head is pounding but we're not really sick, or that we are angry and ready to bite somebody's head off, maybe even the person you're sitting next to on the couch, for no reason at all other than just, being where we don't want to be right now in this world. We don't have a choice about everything. We don't have a choice about that in terms of where we are, but we do have a choice in terms of how we experience it. If our thoughts are saying, freak out, we have the power to grab those thoughts by creating another thought and answering it. For example, if where you're sitting and you were very patiently waiting for the technology to work, like I was, and of course being perfectly calm and composed here, but that could make you want to throw the phone out the window, et cetera, and instead reach for help if there's help available. If you're feeling anxious, acknowledge to yourself, yep, I'm feeling anxious. What am I feeling anxious about that's going on right now in this room where I'm sitting with the floor that my feet are on in March 22nd, 2010. Excuse me, that was wishful thinking. 2020. In this moment, is the end of the world happening in my living room? Are we all absolutely not only, getting sick from a virus, but are we all, is it going to end all of our lives today? Like, right now. I'm not talking Pollyanna-ish or, pie in the sky kind of thinking. I'm talking about being very, very pragmatic and realistic, but also positive. we have the power, to change our thoughts, because that whole system helps us to survive. We know this through a theory called cognitive behavioral theory. Cognitive behavioral, CBT therapy, for example, it's, the hot item on the market today. And it's all about what I just said. We need to start to learn how to answer thoughts that create a an upset, almost a trauma kind of response, in our mind and in our body. Um, there's a place for a trauma response. As you know, I'm a trauma specialist as well as an addiction specialist. Sometimes they go together. But if we've been traumatized, if we've, really experienced what we would classify as a traumatic experience, and if it's the first one, our brain is amazing in terms of how it helps itself and us to survive by literally, during that crisis, creating a trauma response in our brain. Our brain physically changes through trauma. And it can be upsetting to think about that. It can be scary when suddenly, years later after a trauma, something else happens and you totally, totally lose it. And we have what are called panic attacks, which pushes the fight or flight syndrome into motion. If we're not really being traumatized, but we've experienced trauma, our brain is ready to get us out of wherever we are as fast as possible, or to fight. It's the fight or flight syndrome. While we're sitting quietly and calmly in our house right now, listening to this conversation, and you and I are participating in it, if we start feeling, something unsettling in our stomach or our head or our legs, or you name it, any part of your body, immediately try to focus back up into what you're thinking. Is something bad happening at this moment? If it is, what's the most rational approach to deal with? If it isn't, am I breathing? Because, of course, we're breathing, or we wouldn't be alive. But when we start having bad thoughts, and particularly, scary thoughts, once again, catastrophizing thoughts, we're making something into a catastrophe that's happening right now. We tend to breathe in a much more shallow way without realizing it. If you think of when someone is upset and they're talking faster and faster, and it's so awful, and I can't stand it. We're literally breathing from our neck, up. We're not letting the breath come fully into our lungs. And our brain is detecting that we're not getting enough oxygen. That starts us to panic more than anything else. That's why I always keep talking about look where your feet are and let yourself breathe. There's a lot more involved in this, of course, Frank, as I know you know. But I just kind of did a riff, on a whole bunch of stuff that I'm involved in professionally and personally that can be very, very helpful, to keep us calm and stable, no matter, like you said, what's going on.
Now that you hit on trauma, and we always talk about, if you have, let's say you have a broken arm, right? And you have a broken arm, you have the right doctors, you have the right team, and the right physical therapist. You might have a time frame on when that arm is going to heal. Now, for everyone who does have some impact of trauma, we talk about it as it's a cut that's bleeding in your mind, not really, but metaphorically speaking. We don't really know when that trauma in the brain and that image is going to heal, if it ever does heal. So what's your, what kind of not your opinion on that, but something like that, if something is bothering you and it's causing you anxiety, it's causing you depression, it is traumatizing you, what's your first aid kit for that? Especially from a first responder standpoint, because it might not bother you in the first day or the first week, but a month or later, right. You might go through something that's similar to that incident, or something that you're driving and something reminds you of that. And you're like, wow, this happened 2-3 months ago. Maybe it's a year ago, and now it's bothering me.
I'm going to try to keep this simple. my take on that is something. It's very similar to my take on if someone has an addiction problem, and let's say they are trying sobriety, they're trying abstinence. Um, Part of what's successful in at least maintaining abstinence, let alone getting into recovery, is being able to identify what triggers us to begin a relapse. Very often a relapse starts days or weeks or even months before a person actually does. When it comes to trauma, um, trauma, the trauma response happens much quicker. But once again, if we can be aware of what we're thinking or what we're feeling, we can kind of slow the automatic response that happens in our brain by, number one, breathing. That's what I suggest to everybody. In my office with people or on the street with people, wherever I happen to be trying to help somebody, I will literally ask them to stop and start breathing with me. And you don't need to be, a guru or a yoga instructor or a meditator
Right.
to just breathe with somebody, because our bodies breathe naturally. If we can breathe with the natural breath of our body, as opposed to trying to create this very profound thing, and just let our body do what it does, which breathing is all about, taking oxygen in and getting carbon dioxide out. The waste product of our blood is carbon dioxide. The more we take it in and we breathe out the junk and we take more oxygen in, etc., we are going to start to feel calm. We're going to feel more able to think rationally. And that to me is the basis of pretty much any action that we do, but we're usually doing it all unconsciously.
And that's why I love fitness so much, because what are you doing when you're working out? And it doesn't have to be a hard workout. It doesn't have to be a crazy workout, but you're breathing.
Exactly.
You're getting oxygen, and you're getting
That's
a lifesaver,
how
a lifesaver to the
definitely.
brain, right?
Sure.
When someone's drowning and you got to throw them I'm blanking out.
It's okay.
You got to throw them, what is it? A life
A
jacket.
lifesaver.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's huge, and it doesn't have to be, even walking with someone, right, Joe? Like, a few 10-minute walks a day or a 20-minute walk a day, you still focus on your breathing and talking. Now, to me, I really love working out, eating clean, psychotherapy, kind of what you do every single day, and what we're doing right now as a great way to cure depression, anxiety, and even some PTSD. And I love the way you say, your secrets make you sick. What do you really mean? What's really, like, you could say to someone, oh, your secrets make you sick, and they walk away and they'd be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Well, maybe you can explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, definitely. When I say your secrets make you sick, that phrase is not, original with me. I've heard it a million times in other places, and many people also have. But what it basically means is, I'll put it in a number of simple different ways. Starting with, when I was a kid, I was raised Roman Catholic, and we were taught how to go to confession. And in the confessional, we told our secrets. And that's how it made sense to me as a child. Which for many people, if you grew up in a tradition that has that kind of ritual, definitely when we're adolescents and into adulthood, we may not want to share our secrets with, in that way. We may not want to, share our secrets with our loved ones. Secrets aren't always negative or bad or sinful. They're just things that, they can be objective things that we just don't want to talk about. Some things are okay to talk about, but if they are the kind of things that when we think begins to restrict our breathing once again, and this is where awareness comes in. So you get to be aware that, you're not breathing right because your body's reacting. Whatever those things are, it's important to be able to share it with somebody. And that can be your spouse, that can be your partner, that can be your best friend, that can be a religious person, a clergyman, clergywoman, could be a therapist. But sharing problems with another person cut the problem in half. And you're also, in that sharing, you're asking for another very natural part of human life and the human ability, which is called compassion. You're asking the other person to be compassionate. And 9 times out of 10, people respond in a very compassionate way. If we hold things in, then, whatever that is going to grow and grow and grow. And before you know it, it's going to be bigger than you. And among other things, for example, if we are feeling self-destructive or suicidal or homicidal, we let it grow, and it's gonna pop somewhere, against ourselves, against other people, and we don't have to. Carry these heavy weights around. I'm not talking about you guys and gals in the gym. I'm talking about the personal thought weight, because it's made out of thoughts. We don't have to carry it around for our whole lives by ourselves. Some things can't change. We can't change the past. We can't create the future at the moment. But in the moment, we can objectively, calmly, with another person, sort things out and make some decisions about what can I do to change. If one of my secrets is something I did to somebody, I can't go back and redo it, but I can learn how to live in the spirit of a living amends to that person and also to myself. Because very often our secrets are hurting ourselves more than they are anybody else.
Because we're the only ones that know them, really, if we don't share them. And,
right.
And negative thoughts are way more powerful than a positive thought, correct?
Definitely. I mean, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, that's just
mainly because
how your body
the negative thoughts, the fear-based thoughts are in our head, and among other things, our head is attached to our whole body. If our brain detects that lack of oxygen that I mentioned, we're going to get a nice little shot of adrenaline. And sometimes, our negative thoughts are, we get a much bigger bang out of them physically than we do our positive thoughts. We get upset, we feel pumped up. If we're happy, and I'm going to say just happy, like it's a secondary thing, not as important as being upset. Our adrenaline isn't going to, rush us, and get us ready to respond in a trauma response way. It's all in our thoughts. It's all, many wonderful people who've been on this planet, thousands of years ago were basically saying the same thing in many different ways. But it's, what you think is what you create.
Yep, 100%. And talking about how you kind of said your personal weights is like a backpack that you have on your back, that you're adding up your secrets, your baggage, whatever it is, and you're storing it in this backpack that's only you can see and feel, and you don't want that backpack to kind of open up, and it can't, like you said, once the backpack can't fit anymore, what happens? It's going to explode and open up, and once a person does that, that's going to lead into a lot deeper, darker path, and negatively. Now, for someone who does a career like me, and I always hit these statistics, like 20% of people, everyday people, suffer from PTSD, depression, and anxiety. That increases to 30%.
Absolutely.
Responders. Now, would you agree? Those numbers might be more. You know what I mean? That's just on a statistic.
Oh, I would guess that they are. Especially if we're going on self-reporting.
The human mind, in my mind, and we talk about it's like a computer, right? It's, you think you delete something, it can come back up, a pop-up, it comes back up. The human mind can remember things that you thought that was deleted and thought that was gone. You even forgot that they existed. You know what I mean? So for someone like the human brain, for a first responder, day in and day out, seeing, the people that we do deal with and the scenes we do deal with, people that we get called, we don't get called to weddings or birthday parties and things like that. It's people that are going through a hard time and they're confused. What in your opinion, I guess someone who's in trauma and they're going through a trauma, they're kind of in the start of it, right? The brink of feeling a little depressed, or the trauma is affecting them. And we talked about breathing. Now, you could be a social drinker, but you can go through something like that. And social drinker in quotes, whatever you drink, 1 or 2 times a week, maybe your life is not affected by it and you like to go out. Now, someone that's in a trauma and they start drinking to cope with it, that can lead down a really deep, dark path that can cause a lot worse than you already thought it was helping you, but it's not.
I agree.
What
I agree.
What would you say, especially someone who has trauma and someone who is depressed and they start leading to alcohol, what can that alcohol actually end up doing to them? Instead of, it makes it seem like it's helping them in the moment because serotonin is being increased, but really what's going to happen, what could happen to them down the time to come, the path to come?
Well, I think what ultimately can happen to anyone is destruction. I'll put it simply. Alcohol, mood-altering substances promise us some level of oblivion. We can forget about it. We can get lost. We can end up feeling through what the chemical does to us that it wasn't so bad, or that was really awful, but it didn't. It's not going on right now, and everything is good if you just pour me another shot, or if I just smoke something or inject something. The problem with we'll just say, you mentioned trauma, being feeling like we're beginning to be traumatized, or we're beginning to kick up the trauma response by what's going on in the present, and we reach for a bottle or our favorite substance. We're not at all changing the things that we're really upset about. B, more importantly, what we are doing is we're changing our mood. Just talk about alcohol with a powerful chemical depressant, which is toxic to the inside of our body. Part of what we call intoxication.
Sorry to cut you off, Joe, but it's just so easy to get. It's the easiest drug to obtain.
It's totally easy. When I was even when I was your age, way back, during the Lincoln administration. You couldn't buy beer at the gas station. There also wasn't a gas station, but now we can. Alcohol's very, very accessible to anybody, pretty much almost anywhere. And if we go into all the other substances that people ingest for the same purpose, they seem to be available anywhere. Whether we get them legally or not, there seems to be in human nature, where there's a will, there's a way. And there also is in the world, people who are willing to provide. Those great friends that hang out on the street and that we can call at 3 o'clock in the morning and they'll even deliver. Very, very helpful if you want to get, oblivious. But back to your question about alcohol, which is important. It's a depressant. It also, yes, a lot of serotonin is being produced. But the downside is the more you drink, the more you drink, the more you drink. That's basically the way it goes. We know from a medical, perspective that alcoholism, like any addiction, is a genetically predisposed brain disease. Comes from our DNA, which we're not responsible for. Generations, going way back, passed down DNA to the present generation, and the passing down continues to the next generations. We do know that there is, probably a gene. Genes are recessive or dominant. The dominant ones are the ones that get turned on and have an effect at a certain point in our life. There seems to be a gene for addiction. So if we're upset and we start drinking and we keep drinking, there is a point of delineation between a social drinker and drinking alcoholically. The alcoholic drinker is going to drink to get drunk and then beyond. Many people end up having the experience of what's called blacking out, where you're completely functional, and I don't mean like, you're sanely functional. You can literally, get blasted in one place and jump in a car and actually drive a car and not kill anybody, and get to another place and drink more. And even safely get home at 4 o'clock in the morning and hopefully you're getting into your bed in your house. And repeat that over and over and over again. What we've created there is a major crisis for ourselves that has nothing to do with anything we're burying in our head. There are better ways to relax, especially, doing things that actually relax us. Too much alcohol raises the blood pressure. I said earlier, alcohol is a toxic substance to the inside of our body. The majority of the stuff inside of our body is made out of water and very soft tissue.
70% of our body is made of water.
Absolutely. So, put a toxic chemical in it. If we were talking about drinking Clorox as opposed to alcohol, we would have the, the proof a lot sooner. But what I was saying earlier, that feeling of intoxication has also to do with our body trying to desperately get whatever that toxic chemical is out of itself. And in the process, we get what we call drunk because our brain is being attacked. We think of it as fun and entertainment, but our brains think of it as, you're killing me. And you're going to repeatedly kill me until ultimately you do. A little knowledge goes a long way. But you got to believe it. You got to believe it. Many people who believe that they do whatever they do socially are really doing it based on, the gene working inside us. I've had many people over the years in my practice say, when I ask them, do they do mood altering substances? No, I don't drink. Do you do anything else? Well, I recreationally, I'll shoot up, but only on the weekends. And I'm talking about very professional people. I'm not talking about people who are begging for food. It's, I know how to address that in a way that shuts my personal responses down and maintain, a calm mind about it. But that's how delusional, we can get.
Yeah.
We can get delusional without any substances, but throw some substances in and we're living science fiction and it becomes normal to us until the movie ends.
An everyday routine that you live, and then you don't even know that it's not normal because you're already sucked in, It's like the best
and it becomes easy.
Yep, the best quote I heard is, you don't know you're an addict or you're addicted to something until you try to quit.
And boy, that is an ancient test.
Yep.
And many people, when you put it to them, laugh it off or say, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And then they try to do it, and we usually get through, I don't know. I don't know if there's research on how long that lasts. My guess is like 48 to 72 hours. And you're picking up something. I always use the analogy too, not anything that I've had to do personally, but dieting. Seems like people who try to diet, first of all, you like really carb up before the diet happens. You kind of get prepped for the diet by pounds of pasta and a lot of carbs, a lot of sugar, a lot of fat.
Get it all in before it happens, right? Yeah,
get it all in, and pack on 10 more pounds and then begin the process, whatever, purely as something I have to do, as opposed to, I've also got to think my way through it and breathe through it. And probably within, 48 hours, 72 hours for many people. And I'm not saying diets can't be successful or nutrition programs, whatever way we want to put it, but, we are going to fall. The biggest part of dealing with addiction and trauma really is I might fall, but the most important part is me getting back up. And if I have to keep getting back up 1,000 times, if I'm worth it to myself, not for anybody else, we got to be first. If I'm worth it to myself, I'll get up again.
Right.
Even though I know that I can even plan getting that, falling down. But if I can get up again, I'm going to try to stay up.
Yeah, going in what Rocky, I have the poster here. Going in one more round when you don't think you can makes all the difference in your life.
Exactly.
And it's
Definitely.
great. It's great that you said that because even for a diet or nutrition, a lot of people want to just go what you just said, go right into the diet 100% the first day, change everything. And that's why most people
Right.
fail. You need to change one meal at a time. And it's from an addiction standpoint or a drinking standpoint, someone who's been drinking every single day for maybe a year straight or more, right, their whole life, if they try to cut it all at one time without any medical supervision, I just drank 2 years in a row every single day a bottle of whiskey. Now I'm going to just cut it off. There's a serious health risk that could happen, and
Well,
you can have a possible medical emergency there.
definitely. Definitely. I'm glad you said that too, because if anyone's listening who's thinking about if you're drinking heavily or drugging heavily or seriously, heavily having panic attacks, be sure you get some professional help. And we'll just stick with alcohol once again. If you overdrink and then you've been drinking for a while and then you suddenly stop, it's the same thing with benzos. It's the same thing with opiates. Then within a couple hours, our body is going to go through withdrawal because those substances hijack our central nervous system. The electrical system of our body, of every part of our body. And it literally starts to freak out because it can't function anymore without what we've been pumping in it for a long time. We call the process detox. We're detoxifying. That must, I say must, even though I know many people try other things, but that must be done with some professional assistance. Sometimes much better, in a hospital setting. If we're talking about right now, for example, and all the reasons why we can't or won't go to a hospital, you can still get some people around you who will at least, help you through it. And if, you are in danger of getting convulsions or you're going unconscious, then you dial 911 even today. And you will get help.
Yeah, even today you have to because we can't put everything else on hold, right? We can't just have the corona take over everything else and forget about everything.
No, we absolutely can't. We got to remember too, in terms of the coronavirus doesn't have a brain. The coronavirus, doesn't have
It's not
consciousness.
a virus is not dead or living. It's just kind of there.
It exists.
It exists. That's what
It
it's
exists,
that's what
and
fascinates me. It exists.
it exists, and it's like a parasite,
Yep.
and it needs a host.
Host.
It's not trying to hurt you. It's not trying to do bad things because it doesn't think. We got to keep thinking.
Right. I like that. We have to.
And I'm glad we went there today too with this because if someone needs help, listening to 24/7 news cycles on the the channel that's the flavor of your choice on how you like to ingest the news.
Right.
Somebody's got to upfrontly also say, but if you are really in trouble, you still need to dial 911. First responders, you guys are putting your life on the line for all of us anyway right now. And I understand why you do that. And I can't tell you how grateful I am that you do. But I know from my own life, and I'm only 70, so I'm a very young guy.
You're very young.
And there's a lot that I haven't experienced yet. I'm sure I will in the next 70 years. But I know when we got a call for the angels of our society, to come in and examine us and pick us up and take us somewhere. And that still exists. I mean, I'm looking at you, that still exists. And I also want to say, given the chance, that you and all of your brothers and sisters, in NYPD and any police department, any fire department, any EMS department, any first responders, any helpers, there's always help for you. There's always help for you. You guys are carrying all the heavy lifting for us when we're in trouble.
Filling up that backpack that we talked about before, right?
Definitely. Yeah,
I'm really
absolutely.
glad.
And
I'm really glad you said that, Joe. Because before we go, I wanted to ask you one question, and hopefully, we can get your opinion. And
okay,
it's going to go
you
right.
sure you
It's
want
going
to
to
do
lead.
this online?
It's going to lead. Yeah, it's going to, no, it's good. It's going to lead right into what you were just talking about. Um,
Yes,
the scary thing is, Joe, is that the average age of a police officer is 57 from a study in 2013.
I
And
know.
the average age now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 73 or 74, but now since the
Mhm.
suicides, the drugs getting stronger, this is the first population generation, the millennials, that they're dying before their parents repeatedly. And I think the average age of a person now is 71 years old, which is still a
Yeah,
little scary. It's not, that most
yeah,
people
absolutely. It's
retire at
terrifying to
most
me.
most people retire at 65, and what, they're going to work their whole 40 years of their life, and then they only have 6 years to enjoy it, and they might be emotionally scarred, they might be physically hurt, you know what I mean? So for a
Mm.
police officer and a first responder, uh, a police officer average age is 57. Now, do you think that to fight the stigma, a police officer in general, not uncrediting firefighters, because they do the same thing um, that we do in helping people, but I'm talking about, I guess, more of emotional scars, and not even emotional scars, physically, your health. A first responder in general, they, how am I trying to word this? They should see, to
There's
increase
nobody here
their
but us, friend.
increase their living. Um, they should be able to, the jobs, firefighters, police, EMS, EMT, allow to stop the stigma, to see someone every 6 months, and they don't have to be depressed, they don't have to be anxious, but just talk about maybe how they're feeling. That depression and anxious might come, like we talked about, forward down the road, and might lead to drinking, and might lead to a lot of bad habits and coping mechanisms. That's gonna, give a chance to that first responder to die before 57, or just die in their early 60s, or before that. So do you agree that hopefully one day, the first responders, the higher ups, will allow people to seek and get help through, not on your own, because when you do it on your own, the job doesn't know, but the job actually providing more services, maybe every 6 months it's a requirement. Hey, here's a therapist. You got a 20-minute conversation. You don't have to say anything, or you can, but you're not going to be, you're not going to be held accountable unless, of course, you have suicidal or homicidal thoughts. But besides that, you're not going to be you're not going to be held accountable. Basically saying,
I
don't be afraid to ask for help, type of deal.
absolutely. I was talking to a good friend of mine in your field, Frank Reagan, uh, and my sense of him is that he would say, "Do what you have to do." Um, I think that, in terms of, like you said, the higher ups, we are all equal human beings, no matter what our title is. And we all live in a human body, no matter what our title is, or our rank is, or our money, or whatever. All those great material things that distance us from each other. We have the same human body. In the future, you guys are going to be the higher ups. You're going through the experiences that you're going through in this era. Certainly, also when I think of it feels like yesterday at times, going through 9/11 in New York City. And the whole metropolitan area. Um, First responders had an experience that they probably never imagined that they would experience. And I'll tell you, at that point, many of us,
There's a lot
including
of
even,
there's a lot of cops saying they wouldn't never imagine or experience what we're experiencing right now. You know what I mean?
definitely, no, I was just going to say that, and life keeps happening. That was a very unique experience. The experience we're in now is a very unique experience. And the thing that isn't unique is that we all have human bodies, and they react to what happens and what we do. If we're a first responder, or we're the first person to jump into a hole and cover ourselves up and hide from reality, it doesn't change the fact that we have the same body. I think also that the rest of us who are not first responders have a responsibility to society, and also to, once again, to you and your brothers and sisters, to advocate for you. And
Yeah.
sometimes that even means to, gently not get in your face, but just keep reminding that we know you are absorbing so much in a 24-hour period, working right on the front line of society, and we know that it can have an effect on you. And there is absolutely nothing weak about asking for help. Asking for help is one of the strongest things that any person can do.
And especially in a fitness
And
world.
I know that Frank Reagan agrees with me with that too.
Frank Reagan's a good man.
Yeah,
If you watch MMA fights or if you watch football games, they're very high stress
right.
demand.
Football fights.
That'd be
Yeah.
awesome. Football and MMA fighting, very high demand stress emotionally and on the body. You don't see them having 3 or 4 games in a row because they wouldn't be able to
No,
perform. Do you know what I
of
mean?
course
At
not.
a high level
Of
of
course not.
intensity like that. So it's kind of like the same thing is that, especially when we're going through something like now, you know, first responders are performing at such a high level of performance where they're probably not eating. If they took a survey, how many meals are they getting in a day right now? What does their sleep look like right now? Are you using alcohol? Are you drinking water? How's your family life? There's so many variables, Joe. We could talk about this for another time, but it's just I just appreciate you saying what you just said. Before we do wrap
But
up, Joe.
we're all responsible.
Before we do wrap up, I had a question in here. Why is it hard to ask for help? I don't like asking, and I myself don't know why. Is it a pride thing? Question mark. And I responded back that ego is in control. But for someone who is that question, that made sense to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The ego, which is part of a theory, really, you can't take a picture of the ego. It's not a material thing. It's a phenomenon that's created by our brain, called the personality, and the ego's like in the middle of it. The ego's kind of like the adult we present to the world, but the ego's in the way because the ego is kind of like our refined survival system in our unique life situation. And I think, for people that we need to call when anything bad is happening, whether we're talking about, first responders here, people in the military, we can go on and on and on. But the ego gets in the way because we do stigmatize. Like I said at the beginning, the way I look at life, it's a we program. We all have a responsibility to de-stigmatize for each other, for
For
bigger groups of
ourselves.
people, for ourselves, for professions, etc. No one does not deserve help. It does, once again, it doesn't mean, and I think this, I'm not saying this is purely a male issue because I know it isn't, but I do know in terms of growing up as a man in our culture, Superman was called when I was a kid and watched him. The real Superman was on black and white television. He jumped off everything. Suddenly was in his tights and his cape, at the drop of a hat, and he was flying all over the place. And not only intervening, but literally picking the people up who were in trouble and flying them away to a safe place. That's part of mythology that goes back to all of human history. We have to demythologize ourselves, and understand that if I put my clothes on and go to my office, if you put your uniform on and you go to work, that doesn't mean that you are not human. That doesn't mean that inside the uniform is still the same stuff that's inside everybody else, and at times we all need help. I mean, that's a huge, we could have many discussions about that, like what gets in our way of asking for help. Pride, yeah. Sometimes also not pride. Sometimes feeling very guilty, which
Shameful.
makes us shameful and unworthy. It's like I'm letting everybody down because, I'm afraid. And I'm not supposed to be afraid.
But
We can all say
meanwhile,
don't be
yep,
afraid,
you're gonna let everyone
but
else down if you keep drinking and you create these bad habits, or you think the way you do, because then, hey, you might not be around, or even worse, that's the worst part of it. You might not even be able to make it through that.
definitely. If I can just say one more thing in
Sure.
terms of fear, um, not to not to get too spiritual here, but I don't have a problem with spirituality. Uh, my name that my parents gave me was specifically to another Joseph. Two quick stories. There's a Joseph that lived probably 1,000 years before the Joseph I was named after, who had a bunch of brothers who were basically dirtbags and wanted to um, inherit their father's money. But he was the favorite kid. He wasn't the oldest, but he was the favorite. So they took him out in the desert and beat him up and threw him in a ditch. And, we're really hoping that he would just die there. Uh, but he didn't. He was found by other people in the area, and bam! Like within a couple of years, he's sitting next to the king, who was the pharaoh at the time, uh, and acting as his major advisor. And this kid even had the ability to read dreams for the king. Um, and he was a nobody until somebody made him a somebody. But there was a bigger somebody in the picture, which I like to call a higher power. The Joseph I was named after was just a regular guy living in a little town. Was in a construction business. He was a carpenter. He fell in love with this beautiful girl in the town. They got engaged, and one day she told him, Joe, I'm pregnant. And they had never done anything to make that happen. He had a dream, and in the dream, he heard a voice saying, Joseph, do not be afraid. Everything's going to be fine. Do what you know in your heart you have to do. And he did. He took on this huge responsibility. And in that society, what he could have done is gone to the authorities, and that woman would have been executed for
Yeah.
adultery. But fear, got him into action in a loving way because he was allowed. And I think we can allow, something much bigger than us, whatever we want to call it, whatever tradition, even if there's no tradition, even if you don't know what it is, or you can't even prove that it exists. There's certain points in the human mind where we need hope, and we need light coming from somewhere that's not coming from ourselves. It's about being a little humble when things are going well, and when things are not going well. Not being humble out of shame or guilt, but being humble the way we're not feeling ashamed